Welcome to the Ralph Bivens Project. I'm Ralph Bivens, and we're here today in Houston, Texas, the energy capital of the world. And oil's over $100 a barrel, and gasoline's over near $4 a gallon. And we're thinking about what's next. And this is a great place to talk about it. And we're lucky today to have Mike Spears of Lee and Associates Houston. He's managing principal there. It's a big commercial real estate firm here, and he knows what's going on in this market. So welcome, Mike.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Ralph.
We were talking just a little while ago about, energy, and we see these oil prices like this, and I don't know exactly how, but I think we're here, every major energy company and a lot of vendors and suppliers and oil field service. Something's good's got to happen sooner or later when we have oil at these prices. It's got to have some benefit to us, doesn't it?
But here's what's interesting. I mean, you start looking at, I think you can get, oftentimes can look at things like, which we all go to the oil prices, right? Which I think it's about $107 a barrel today, right? Which is the highest we've seen it in, very, very long time. I remember there was a lot of talk back in, I think it was 2014 when the energy sector had a bit of a downturn, and, the music stopped, because you go previous to that, and I specialize in industrial real estate in Houston. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a crazy time, and we spent the better part of 12, 15 years really enjoying the growth that occurred, not only in the energy sector, but across all sectors in Houston. But the energy sector, we can't disguise the fact that, put off the fact that it is by far and away one of the largest drivers of business in our real estate market. It's not the big. I mean, well, I'm not going to say it's the biggest. It is probably the biggest individually, but we've become a lot more diverse. But I think when I'm going back to what I was talking about, is a lot of emphasis gets placed on the price of oil. That price can change, can and will change, and unfortunately, there are times when it's not necessarily anything we can do about driving that price, because there's so many outside factors that influence it. With the Saudis and Russia and a lot of other places, the overall world market. But I think what you really want to be looking at is a combination of the price of oil as well as the rig count, because really it's not just about the companies that pump the oil out of the ground. It's all those companies that service them, the valve companies, the groups that do the blowout preventers, and all the manufacturing that occurs. And Houston's industrial market is a very unique market compared to most other major markets in the United States that focus primarily, for the most part, on institutional grade dock-high distribution, which we have a lot of that, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I'm sure. But I think what's interesting to me is that, and I was looking at this stat. Admittedly, I was looking at this over a month ago. In fact, this predates the Ukraine war. But we were looking at oil reaching close to $90 a barrel. Then I looked at rig counts and realized that rig counts were at, I think it was just under 14% of where they were the last time oil was at $90 a barrel. Now, part of that is because the technology's gotten better, and they can pull out a lot more oil out of the ground than what they could, back when oil was as high as it was, and there was a lot more rig counts. So you're going to see a little bit less from that reason. The most part of what it tells us is they're not drilling yet. And so despite the fact that we have really high oil prices, I don't want to get all into the politics of it, but there's certain factors that are preventing them from drilling. And then there's a fact that a lot of these companies got burned when the energy downturn took place, and either went out of business or were bought out, because everybody's kind of sitting back on the sidelines. And I think that's really interesting, and we'll get into this more later, but I think we have a huge driver to our market that's basically, for the most part, you'll see some activity there, but has been sitting idle for a while. Yet, segueing into the Houston market in general, we're seeing one of the hottest, if not the hottest, industrial market in Houston's history right now. And it's crazy, because it's like, wow, we have this huge influencing factor that's really not doing anything right now. And so we could be in for a few different scenarios. Again, we can talk more about that if you want to get into what I think may happen later, for what it's worth, bold prediction or whatever. But I really feel like that's pretty profound. That's interesting. It tells us a few things, but one of the things it does tell us is that Houston has clearly become more diverse. And despite what our reputation might have been for the longest time, which we were so reliant on oil and gas for our real estate market, that it's not necessarily the case anymore because we're booming right now. I've never
it's
seen anything
doing
like
good without drilling necessarily.
Yeah.
It's doing.
Can't wait till they start drilling again. I mean, that'll get real fun, but it's been fun without.
And what you're saying, the rig count, of course, is a measurement of how much oil wells are being drilled and operated in well, I guess in this country and in this, I probably include some offshore, depending on which iteration you're looking at. But yeah, so so we've had this huge increase in oil prices this in 2022, really, and a little bit before that also. But big increase in oil prices, but nobody's really drilling a lot. And you're like me, you're thinking when you're talking prices this high and the need so great and the supply is so slim on a global basis, you're thinking sooner or later the drilling's going to have to happen. And when that happens, it opens up a ton of demand for these companies that, build the parts.
The politicians are going to have to, they may be wanting to continue with policies, but at some point, the public says, hey, they're bosses, we're their boss. Say, hey, we're really sick and tired of paying $8 a gallon or $7, wherever you're at, depending on where you're at, for gas, and we need to bring it down. And I don't know, there's not you can talk about handing money out to people and lessening the blow, but that reality of it is the only way to bring that price down is for us to go out and produce. And it has all these other factors economically and on a geopolitical stage. We don't have to get into that, but I mean, we're buying oil from Russia. Well, if we stop doing that, and we can convince Europe to stop doing that because we can deliver it to their doorstep with all these LNG plants that were built back, predating all of this. And what is it? What was it? What they say? 11 more permits that are out that they're waiting on a stamp that can get started. That's huge. I mean, we have more natural gas, which by the way is clean energy, sitting out there that is ready to go, and we can export it. And we export these things. We can do so much more with it aside from just help the economy and do what it does and help Houston real estate for sure. But there's a lot of power that gets held with providing energy, and we have that ability, and we will. And we're going to get back there. We're going to get back to that point. I'm not an energy guy. I'm a real estate broker, but does it help our market? You bet. I mean, it's a lot of fun when oil's high and they're drilling, and never mind the e-commerce and what we're seeing with all of that, which again we'll get into that in a minute. So
yeah, I mean, it is. You think it's got to help sooner or later if we start drilling. I mean, it's going to make jobs for people that need jobs. It's going to create demand for more factories and more where the crane served buildings and industrial type buildings, stuff like that. So that's something to look forward to. You'll have to come back and later this year.
It's interesting. Houston's market's so diverse, and there's so many factors I think that tend to influence it that don't necessarily apply the same wisdom or same logic to other markets because I think it's a percentage, and I don't know, I can't tell you the exact percentage because you can look everywhere and you can find me, I can find you, 10, 20 different interpretations here, but I would go so far as say that well more than 30% of our industrial market is made up of that metal manufacturing type building, which is it's a much higher percentage than you see in all the other major markets out there. And so where I think it gets interesting is when you start talking about vacancy rates and absorption and all of that. Well, you're classifying those two products. You're classifying dock high, Class A distribution, institutional grade distribution space in the same category, industrial, that you classify metal manufacturing. There's some interesting things can happen. I mean, you can have a vacancy rate go up because one of the REITs will put 2 million square feet on the ground, and that'll move the needle until it gets leased. That'll push the vacancy rates up, and yet as a broker, you can have a client looking at you going, well, how in the world with 12% vacancy, we're not there, we're not at 12% right now. But how in the world with 12% vacancy do you not have a building for me? You're going, because they didn't build any of those. I mean, you need 200,000 foot of metal manufacturing space and it's not out there. And then vice versa. The two things can go hand in hand. So that's one thing.
There's a shortage of this heavy duty manufacturing space right
Right.
now.
Right. Well, I'm not going to call it a shortage right now. No, I'm going to
But
say
there's
that
not an
we're,
oversupply. It's in
yeah,
balance.
it's not, there's not a glut. There's definitely not a glut, because everybody shifted gears and did a good job of it. All the developers shifted over to what was in demand, which was a lot of e-commerce related stuff. It's not just e-commerce, but the dock high distribution. And so we see a lot of building in that. Yet, interestingly enough, it's for the most part, it's market. I'm not going to say they've even truly caught demand. I mean, every time that, we use conventional wisdom and say, well, that's looking kind of frothy, or it's looking like they're putting a lot of space on the ground and where are the tenants? And then we watch, and in a very short period of time, all the tenants, it fills up. You're going, well, I guess they had it right because, they
I mean, that's
obviously.
one thing that a lot of people are driving around in Houston and in Southeast Texas. They see, God, there's so many warehouses being built, big, huge things, and where that's on the Beltway South or going up 290, just everywhere near the port, of course, but a ton of construction. Have you ever seen warehouse construction this strong?
No, not in Houston. No, I mean, you go to Seattle or Vancouver, and you'll see like it's crazy right now, or was crazy, for a couple of years there. It depends on which market you go to. No, not Houston. I mean, it's been pretty robust, and yet, again, every time I kind of look at it and go, oof, let's see, and then it fills up, and it's continuing to happen. I mean, there's deals that are. We've had some of the best markets on record over the last couple of years, and look, even when COVID, we always say during COVID, I don't know what exactly that means, but when COVID was at its height.
I'd like to say that in the past tense. I wish we could.
Yeah. Well, I always joke when I talk to people that are coming in that are friends of mine that live in other cities like New York and LA. I'm like, nah, COVID's been over with for 2 years here. I mean, we all still got it, but everybody still got it. But everybody keeps getting it. They get it, but it's just kind of one of those things. We moved on and went that route, and yeah, it worked out for us. I think just Houston is I think no matter what, whether it be a hurricane or a downturn or whatever, Houston's shown a resilience that I just don't think you're going to find at any other city out there. And I'll tell you, it may not be the prettiest city. It's pretty, but not that pretty compared to some cities. It's not, the traffic's not great and the weather sometimes isn't so great, but by gosh, what makes this city what it is the people. And I think, when you see a disaster such as Harvey and things like that, somebody asks the question, why would anybody want to move into Houston after all of that? My question really is, it's actually, why wouldn't they? I mean, we're talking about a 1,000-year event and more water, that got dumped on our city than Seattle gets an entire year, which they're the rainiest city, right?
4 days, we got 60 inches or something.
That doesn't happen. That's not going to happen.
The biggest flood, biggest rainfall total ever in America's history.
But it's enough. I read a cool stat. It was there was enough water dumped on Houston to cover the continental United States with a half an inch of water. I mean, that's a lot of water. But that's not going to happen a lot. But what you also got to see on TV, instead of just seeing the destruction, which to me was personally the most destructive thing I've ever witnessed firsthand in my life, while simultaneously being the most inspirational thing I've ever seen in my entire life, because what came alive was the people. And we all stepped up and did our part. And so when somebody asked, well, why would they want to move their office, facility to Houston after all that? I'm like, why wouldn't they? Because you've got a whole city full of people that you want working for you, that you want in your warehouses. The water thing's not going to happen. That's, the likelihood of that happening again in any of our lifetimes is so low.
Yeah, it was a 1,000-year event for sure. Maybe more than that, who knows? But you're right about the inspirational thing. I just remember looking, you'd see these, water as people were on the roofs of their apartments and in dire need. Have these guys, out there in their bass boats picking people up in danger. Dangerous with water was 30 feet deep and treacherous and everything. And they just volunteers getting out there on their own. You couldn't set that. Oh, I'm gonna just call 911. This is like, get your boat, roll up your sleeves, and start saving some people's lives. And they did. That's
by the time FEMA showed up, we were like, yeah, just set that over there. We've kind of got this under control. We did. We had it. I mean, we did it, and that says a lot about the people. And talking about the market in Houston, that drives our market too. People want those people. We have a robust job market. We have a great source of labor, and I think what drives, fundamentally speaking, industrial for the most part is going to be the availability of labor. And we've got it. We've got good labor. We've got skilled labor. We've got everything you're looking for. We're a very business friendly environment, and just those factors alone drive the market. And they're going to always drive the market. People want to be here. I mean, they move. They don't move out of Houston. They move into Houston, and from all those other
population is growing significantly.
Yep.
One thing, a lot of the distribution buildings, as we call them, big, huge warehouses, 200, 300,000 or more, the big,
Way more than that,
big, great big warehouses have been, this is, of course, Amazon is building a bunch of them, but you also have other, retailers, doing their business, and that they need these things. They're not. I think maybe they're just. But a lot of the leasing you're seeing. Well, here's a new, some restaurant supply group, or somebody that sells directly to consumers. A ton of that kind of distribution and construction is gone on, and I guess it's just based in the fact that, and I think COVID probably did accelerate this.
That would help. Yeah, I mean,
people buying stuff online instead of going to the store, and that translates into warehouse demand, doesn't it?
You bet. I mean, in fact, I think you can. There's a lot of different areas you can go with this. Okay, and what driven. I think one that I thought was interesting, and I read up on it, was, think about grocery supplies, and ordering groceries online. Boy, I always laugh. We had twins, and they're about to turn 13. We were just talking about that prior to the call. But, when we had them, she was like, where was all this when I had the kids? Because she had to load it up and go to the grocery store. We always had to, it was it was hard with all the kids. But, but I'll tell you what happened with that. And I think this is really interesting was, and so you see, and by the way, you do see a lot of cold storage that we didn't see prior to this. But warehouse that has freezer storage and cooler storage, a lot more than that than we had in the last 20 years. But what was interesting is there was a demographic that I think for the most part had kind of been written off because they just, and I'll say it's she and a he, but she would refuse to go to the grocery, which refused to go online. She wasn't going to do it. She was going to go to the store with her list and her coupon book, and that's how she was going to do it. And when COVID happened, she was forced to stay home with grandma, and granddad. And they were forced to stay home and do this, right, and use online because they couldn't go out to the store and all that. And I was reading this, and I read this. It was back in 2021, I think, early 21. There was an article that came out, and it was talking about the customer service for new customers, right? And they were able to zero in and figure who grandma was. And they found that the number one comment was, I can't believe I haven't been using this all along, right? Because it's so simple and it's so convenient, right? And I think of the significance of that. Grandma, who is she? That's the baby boomer generation. That's the biggest demographic on the planet right now. And so a group that had pretty much said, we're not getting grandma for the next 10 to 15 years, landed grandma, which means that there's a massive influx of business that they just expected not to get it. And they were going to grow otherwise. And so they landed a huge, which basically is going to drive warehouse demand as a result of it, because now they have a massive amount of people that are now using that service versus going to the grogrocery store. And it's across every industry. It's, there's a day goes by that my doorbell doesn't ring.
You introduce people to it during the crisis of COVID, and then, because they had to.
Now they're loving it. Now
they go to even people working from home, and they're not going to come into the office. Well, the companies found out, this kind of works here. Maybe it doesn't work all the way here, but people were forced to do these experiments because there's no other way to do it.
Right. And that's driven warehouse demand like you wouldn't believe. I mean, it's they have to put that stuff in the warehouse and get it out, and it's driven all different, everything from your regular dock high type warehousing to the cross docks to truck terminals to just every sector, and even into the neighborhoods and some of this infill sites where they're trying to do the last mile type distribution. Where you've even seen some repurposing of product that wasn't really meant for warehouse that's now turning into a warehouse space because they're doing, and they're aggressively going. It's not just Amazon, but Amazon's the big one. But Walmart, Walmart just did over 1 million square feet on the east side of town. and they're out doing the same thing. And you name it, Chewy's dog food, that's a big one. I mean, they just did a huge site. What was it? It was probably it was an 800,000 square feet. It was a big deal. And these are all deals that were done. Chewy's did theirs. I think was in earlier part of this year. Did 700,000 feet. And you name it. All HD Supply did 600,000 square feet. Crawford Electric, which is another thing we can talk about, which is the material cost, and we can get into that later too. But building they're building homes left and right, and we're in one of the hottest, residential real estate markets that we've seen on record. Trying to buy a house right now, it's great if you want to sell one, but trying to buy one right now is, whoever wants to pay asking price, and yet people are coming in and paying over asking price. Houses are selling faster than they've ever sold. Inventory is not keeping up with it.
Builders
all of that ultimately drives.
Builders can't build them fast enough, and a lot of builders, they'll have not just shortage of lumber, but they'll have shortage of windows. They have a shortage of garage doors, and of course appliances and all these things. And that kind of brings up another topic I want you to think about a little bit. Would be the I guess they call it the supply chain crisis, and we don't have enough. Everything slowed down because the builders can't get their building materials, and then maybe the grocer can't get. He may not be bare on shelves, but maybe he's not going to get a full inventory of, I'm going to have a 12 ounce and an 18 ounce, and the full inventory that they would normally have. And some places do, have a shortage, I guess, of groceries. But tell me about the supply chain issues.
Use a simple example. Think about the toilet paper situation, right? It was always kind of a joke, right? We had this run on toilet paper when COVID hit and everything. And let's face it, the sad part is they weren't making any more money than they would have made otherwise, because they didn't have enough inventory in their warehouse to restock those shelves. And so, people are using the same amount of toilet paper today than they did pre-COVID. Okay, that didn't change.
Just worried about running out.
They were. Yeah, that's whatever the reason, they were worried about running out. So there was a shortage on it. They couldn't restock the shelves, and they found a major break in the supply chain. All up to that point, there had been the focus on just-in-time real estate, where they're keeping razor-thin inventories, or were keeping razor-thin inventories in their warehouses. That's changing, and it's changed. And so instead of just in time, it's just in case real estate. And so you're seeing a significant amount more inventory in their warehouses compared to previous years for those very reasons. Because it's not just pandemic's one thing, but there's a number of things that influence that. And you factor that along with the fact that factories were shut down, and and then there was moratoriums, where they couldn't export them out. And so we had a big glut and a big, and I don't see that problem getting solved anytime. We want to solve it really quick, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to continue on for quite a while until we get the handle on it and catch back up. But one of the ways we're going to do it is in changing how we view the supply chain, and how, and there's people are a lot smarter than I am that know how to do it, and they're going to do it, and it just takes time to do it. And so in the meantime,
I think what you were saying there a second ago was, we're talking about, it used to be just in time. We don't need to have a bunch of stuff in storage and pay for all that leasing of warehouses and the warehouse employees, etc. But we can just do it just in time, just get it there just in time. So the amount of storage and logistics expense was smaller. And now that's kind of, that's changed. You don't, because you can't, if you have zero, you're not going to make anything, like you said. So, so now they're building more warehouses let's have some backlog in case things don't get here in time. In case the ship doesn't come from Asia when we want it to.
And I think two trends you see there that are when you think about it, are fairly logical. Is one, they take more square footage, right? But I think buildings are getting taller too. Well, they've been getting taller for the last 20 years, right? And we've seen buildings. I mean, when I first got into business, at 24-foot clear height, 26-foot clear height, that was a pretty tall. That was a tall building. That's obsolete now. Nobody wants that anymore. I mean, it jumped up. It went up to 30, and then went to 32. And I mean, I feel like you're going to see 40 and 42 and 44 before you know it. And it's going to happen quick. And we're going to skip over the middle part because we have to.
Warehouses with 44-foot ceilings that
Yeah, that's
they can
right.
stack stuff that high. Wow.
Yep, because they have to. Think about it. When you pay by the per square foot, it benefits you to have cubic footage, because you can rack and you go up taller with those racks. But with the supply chain situation, it's affected everything, but it's pretty heavy impact on the builder supply market, and you've seen go up significantly just about across the board, particularly in lumber and steel. That impacts a number of factors on the new construction. One, the cost, right, just over the supply period. But two, the wait times, which when you're in the development world, time is money. And if you're waiting 6-12 weeks longer to get your steel package delivered, the clock's ticking, the interest clock, you're building interest up. And so how does that translate into real estate? Well, what's going to happen is we're going to see rent growth. We're going to see rents go up, and we are. So I'll say we are going to. We have seen, and are going to continue to see rents push up solely because of the costs. So if you own an existing building, this is one thing. But if you have a building that you're putting on the ground, your costs have gone up, and therefore you're going to need more rent to cover those costs and to reach the kind of returns they're looking for. It's pushed everything. I mean, cap rates have gone down, big down. I mean, the days of the 8 cap or 9 cap that was considered a awesome deal or a crazy deal that's gone. We don't show me an 8 cap. There's something wrong with it, and we're seeing cap rates. I've even heard below 5% on some of the institutional grade dock high distribution space, which is it's crazy because that used to be that we only heard about that coming out of California. We didn't expect that to ever happen here. It's happening. From there all the way up to the more local type credit tenants and their freestanding, it impacts every market. So people they're going to take a little bit lower return here in order to make that deal work, because there isn't a deal that's available that you can make work that is any higher than that. And so everything it's all connected, right? The capital market's going to get connected to the user market. That's going to get connected to the costs of construction and their ability to get it done. Yet we're building anyway, and it's still working. People are paying it. I mean, rental rates across the board have gone up, but we've seen rental rates all the way from, in some cases, like you take 2021 the average asking rental rate for dock high type distribution space was around 44 cents a foot triple net. We talk in monthly terms here in Houston on industrial. We're like us and California are the only two places. I don't know why we do that, but we do. And they've jumped from all the way there to and this is, by the way, this is new construction. This isn't all of it. This is new construction, but you're seeing as high as 49 cents a foot. So 44 to 49 cents a foot, which is an 11% increase. Never seen an increase like that in our history over time like that. It's a pretty interesting time right now, and yet the market's handling it. They're going to have to. So.
Construction's very strong. Rents are very strong, and considering the amount of space that's being built, the vacancy rate is under control. Because a lot of people think, well, if you have to pick a sector that's the best right now, industrial, the warehouse business is great. Really
that's
good.
Across the U.S. That's everywhere, but definitely in Houston too. I mean, it's I don't want to I'm not an office guy. I don't want to get too much into that, but I think in the office world, you see kind of interesting trends. And in one respect, it's as people realize that technology, we learned how to use it. Like we had all this great technology, and frankly, we really weren't using it. None of us had time to learn how to do it. We just weren't doing it. And here we are talking on a video conference. I didn't do video conferences prior to all. I mean, I did on occasion, but usually we didn't do video conferences. Now you just do them all the time. But since we learned how to do it, people have made the decision that, hey, do we need to put 50 people in this office, or can we really let 20 of them work from home, 30 of them work from home? And so when their 20,000 square foot office space is up for renewal, they're saying, hey, do we really need 20, or can we get by with 8? Now, conversely, what you see on another way is because for the last decade, you've seen this trend towards open office concept. Again, I'm not an office guy, so there's people who may disagree with me on this one. I'm kind of thinking more on a simple.
Well, you got office guys that work for you there. You probably
right.
And you're on the board of directors of
the
National Lead Associates, which is a national firm.
Right.
You hear a lot about it. I think you hear a lot about office.
Interesting though, with COVID, that open concept office space is change. I think it's changing. In my personal opinion, I think you're going to see that. I'm not going to say it's dead on arrival, but I think there's a trend going back into those private offices, partially because of the social distancing and everything else involved with it. And so in one respect, you say, well, they may need less office space, but on the other side, you're going, well, as a per person basis, you're going to see more square footage. So in other words, yes, we may take less square footage, but the people that are coming to the office, we're going to give them more square footage to work with. But again, that's my personal opinion. I'm not going to say that's the opinion.
Workstations with, 5 people here on this side and 5 people on the other side, and it's all just compressed into 20-foot stripping.
Yeah.
I think now, and somebody comes in, they start coughing or something. You go, oh
yeah,
it's
COVID. Everybody's got COVID. No, you don't get sick.
The COVID was like a big change thing. It's just all these different areas of our lives and of our companies and of our real estate. Everything it's like a World War II type of event that just revolutionizes everything and then changes our lives all over the place. Now, what about we talked about the supply chain, and we know things like, well, Los Angeles and Long Beach, they have all those cargo ships stacked up waiting for weeks and weeks and weeks to unload. And Houston Port doesn't seem to have that problem. And
no.
What about our port? Is our port going to be a winner out of all this?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at TEUs, which is 20-foot equivalent units. Those are the big containers you see. And if you can measure that, you can actually extrapolate that or apply that to what demand looks like for real estate. You got to put it somewhere. And we've seen that steadily go up since 2017, a significant amount, primarily coming from Asia. Now, understand something too. Houston's always been an exporting port. We're a major exporting port, but we've just not seen, all the imports going, or I'm not saying all, but a large chunk goes to the West Coast and all that. But we are pushing, and we're looking at pretty, just the Asian imports alone, it went from, as much as 34% increase since 2017. On the number of imports coming in from Asia. Yeah, I mean, it's in some cases you say that Asia is a percent of total on the exporting. I mean, that's gone up too, by the way. We're looking at as much as 50% there. But again, there's people that probably could talk on that a little bit more than I am. I track it on a more macro type level just to watch it, but it's a major deal. I mean, and as our port continues to grow and continues to be a major factor and a major driving factor to the Houston area, I think again what you're going to see is at some point we're going to start drilling again, and when we do, I think you're going to see a lot of these LNG plants that were built, and the number of permits that they haven't even built them yet that are sitting out there. I think when we're allowed to do that again, we're going to do it. There's a lot of world things happening in the news right now that we all know about that I think are ultimately going to push the hand and have them, which is going to drive the market even more. It could almost be a seesaw. I mean, if you see, some people are going to talk about, it's been so hot, there's going to be a downturn at some point. But you got to wonder, does that downturn look like a seesaw where in one respect you see what's hot right now kind of go down a little bit. Meanwhile, the other side, which is the energy sector, which I think we talked about that's a major impacting factor in our market. Always has been. Now we've become way more diverse. Houston has really adjusted compared to what happened with the 80s and everything else, where we're watching it right now. I mean, we're in a hot market. Things are booming, yet a major impacting driving factor in our economy is kind of almost, I'm not gonna say they're sitting idle, but for the most part, comparatively, they have. And yet oil is sitting over $100 a barrel. And as that continues to change, we're going to see that, at some point, they're going to start drilling again. And that's when all those other buildings, that metal manufacturing stuff that I talked about, is going to start bumping again or really increasing again.
The seesaw analogy is good because up and down, you just think about it. Here we are, just April of 2022, only 2 years ago, was the fateful day when oil crashed down to zero.
Minus
Zero.
38.
Yeah, minus 38.
I didn't know that was possible.
We're below.
Somebody was saying, well, what does this mean? I'm like, I'm not sure what it means, honestly. But
But it is,
I think that was more of
the
a
oil business, and there were a number of companies that didn't make it through that low point, and they stayed low for a while. So just like the seesaw, it's coming back up, and I don't know. You may be right. The only alternative to solving some of the issues we have and working our way out of inflationary things will be to drill, put a lot of supply into the overall market, supply of oil, and supply and demand will work, and prices will go down, and then the truckers that have to buy diesel at $6 or $7 a gallon.
That pushes product costs.
Yeah, that's right. They have to charge more to. But if they can get, if diesel goes back down, then the cost of shipping goods it helps. It'll make prices easier on everybody eventually. It kind of looks like a logical pathway for our future. Mike Spears, I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me, and we're this will be posted on with links to it on realtynewsreport.com, which we carry news there, and we report on all kinds of real estate, including what your company, Lee and Associates Houston, does, and things you sell and lease, and you guys have a lot of say so in this and what goes on in this market. So we appreciate you taking time to talk with us here, and maybe we'll get back together soon. Say what happened with this energy? Did the energy deal go? Really, did the energy dream come true? Like there's some possibilities there, and that's a hopeful word as we move on here through 2022 and amid all this uncertainty. Thank you, Mike Spears.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ralph. I appreciate you having me on. So
you bet.